going to do for people who buy cars?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and thanks for the invitation. Indeed, this is a very important guideline that we have published. We had started engagement with the OEMs since 2017, and we were hoping that we would enter into a code of conduct with these OEMs, particularly as they have entered into similar arrangements in Europe, in Russia, as well as many other countries. So when we intervened, uh, we were hoping for some cooperation. But right now, we've published these guidelines, and these guidelines will ensure that consumers in South Africa have a sufficient choice insofar as, for instance, whether they handle a motor plan with a motor vehicle, or when they need to choose where to repair or maintain their motor vehicle while still in warranty. And this is important because in many cases, consumers tend to lose warranty. But in addition to that, the guidelines go further. They talk to issues of exclusion. And the intervention here is to ensure that the independent service providers are able to participate in this market. It should be easier to be approved dealers. It should be easier for independent service providers to obtain parts, to obtain all the technical information that's necessary to ensure full participation in this market. So with these guidelines, we expect OEMs to comply, and there will indeed be full benefits to consumers in South Africa.
It would seem sort of obvious that, I mean, if you're going to have competition, and that is your job, and in our economy, we have a competitive economy, that's the point, you should be able to go and get your car, your Honda, your Audi, whatever it is, fixed wherever you want it to be fixed. And yet, that's not what was happening here. These companies, it seems, these dealers were almost able to charge what they wanted.
Indeed, and they use warranties to tie consumers from repairing their cars or maintaining their cars, from alternative service providers. And consumers know out there that there are some competitive choices that exist. But in our country, that has not been the case. It is very, very difficult for consumers to exercise the choice. They are forced to maintain cars, with the approved dealers. They are forced to repair cars with these exclusive approved auto body repairers who don't face much competition. So with these guidelines, we expect these reforms, when they kick in, for OEMs to comply and for the market to be competitive in South Africa.
You talk about OEMs, I presume that's, I think, original equipment manufacturers. Did I understand you correctly when you said that this reform has happened already in other markets, Russia, the European Union? So these companies, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, I can keep going naming these people for a while, they have agreed to do this. They're living under this kind of system, this new system in other jurisdictions. Did they try and oppose the introduction of it here? Did they want us in South Africa to pay more than someone in the European Union would?
This is regrettable, and unfortunately, the majority of these OEMs have opposed this. Of course, I cannot single out one OEM that never opposed this. Unfortunately, it cannot work when we only have one OEM supporting the initiative. But the majority of the OEMs raised all sorts of technicalities around this. And it did not make sense to us because these are reforms that are in place in Europe, China, Russia. We even invited the Russians to come to South Africa to share with us how this market works. We had a very open seminar where we invited all role players for the Russians to share their experiences. And even with that information, we still are facing resistance.
Mr. Deputy Commissioner, you're a very polite man. I don't have to be quite as polite as you are. I don't have to speak to these people. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, how dare they suggest that we have to pay more? You don't have to reply. How dare they suggest we have to pay more than someone in Europe does just because of where they live? Anyway, I will bring myself towards myself and hopefully I'll remain together. This all comes into force at the beginning of July, so 6 months from now, roughly. I am presuming it's going to mean most of us are going to save money.
Indeed, once these come into force, we expect compliance, and indeed, by merely exercising choice, consumers are going to save money. This is quite guaranteed. And if this does not happen, we will be forced to enforce the Competition Act, which is not our sort of first best choice in this particular instance. We think, given what is happening in other territories, it should be very easy for the OEMs to adopt those reforms in South Africa. And indeed, consumers in South Africa are bound to benefit from these initiatives.
We know, and I'm sure you've come across this a million times, in any economic situation, you have what you call entrenched interests. And these dealerships are the very definition of entrenched interest. They're very good, very clever at coming up with all sorts of ways to delay things, postpone. They've got money for lawyers. They've got technical things. They've got threats. They've got all sorts of things. Do you think they're going to try and postpone what you're doing?
Well, we have provided them sufficient time. Even the grace period, as you can see from the Competition Commission side, we are approaching this, with a very open mind and being as fair as we can. We have had some challenges during the process, I've said. Some initial, ideas to have a code of conduct were vehemently opposed by NAMSA. And we don't expect that kind of response now, because with a guideline, it's a legal instrument that they have to comply with. If they don't comply with this instrument, we will be compelled to prosecute and pursue cases. So it's in their hands. We expect compliance. These are very, very important companies in South Africa. They contribute significantly to our GDP. Our government supports these companies handsomely, and we expect a partnership rather than some adversarial form of a relationship with these companies.
If you feel you need a little bit of a hand to do some arm wrestling with them, let me know, Deputy Commissioner. I do need to just check on the quality, because I know they will say the quality of the repair will be an issue. I mean, there are ways to guarantee that, aren't there? There are ways to make sure that the person who fixes your car does a good job.
No, indeed, we are not even suggesting that we should drop the quality standards. They should still be able to appoint. All we are simply saying is that they must rethink exclusivity, particularly with the appointment of auto body repairers. Likewise, for independent service providers, by the way, in Europe and these countries, they provide technical information. Of course, at reasonable access cost. They provide this information. It should be available to our independent service providers in South Africa. Again, in these territories, there are parts that are not branded in OEM parts. They are equal quality matching parts that are used. And we are not by any way suggesting that we should, provide substandard service, substandard quality of parts and so forth. So what we expect, once there is these reforms, the market opens up. We expect competition, at least at the dealership level. We expect competition, at least at the repairers level. And this will also influence how insurers allocate work, because we have seen that although insurers are registering many players, they tend to offer work to few selected firms. So we are also encouraging insurers to open up their base to ensure that access to work is equitable.
Harden Ratchisisu, I do appreciate your restraint. I respect your restraint. Thank you very much indeed. The Deputy Commissioner at the Competition Commission. Well, let us know if you find in 6 months' time people aren't actually living up to those new restrictions and regulations. Well, still to